She was just grabbing allergy meds and almond milk when a cop slapped cuffs on her in public. Said she matched a description. Never even looked at her ID. What happened next would shake the entire state. Renee Alcott had only two things left on her to-do list that day: allergy meds and almond milk for her morning smoothies. It was a quiet Friday in mid-March, and East Point, Georgia moved like it knew the weekend was coming. She liked to keep her Fridays light, end the week soft, as she called it. The pharmacy bag crinkled softly on her passenger seat as she turned onto Washington Road. She adjusted the AC, glanced in the rear view, and saw it. A DeKalb County cruiser, 2 cars back. She didn't think much of it, at first. But when she changed lanes, so did he. She merged left. He did too. Her eyes narrowed. Maybe he was just heading the same way. But the way he rode her bumper said otherwise. Renee knew what this felt like. She'd worked over a decade in the legal system, drafting oversight policy, analyzing officer-involved incidents, scrubbing bad data. She believed in law. She believed in staying calm. But when the blue and red lights flared in her rear view, her stomach tightened anyway. She pulled over immediately, hazards blinking, windows halfway down, hands on the wheel. Her ID and registration were in her purse. She didn't reach for them yet. The officer approached, mid-40s, pale, thick-necked. His nameplate read, Dresner. "You know why I pulled you over?" His voice was flat. "No, sir," Renee replied, polite but firm. "I wasn't speeding. Was there an issue?" "Your car matches the description from a call we just got. Possible shoplifting. Walgreens on Sylvan." She blinked. "I just came from CVS. I have my receipt right here. I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle." Her head tilted slightly. "Excuse me?" "Ma'am, step out of the car. Now." Renee kept her tone even. "Officer Dresner, I work for the Georgia Department of Justice. I'm a legal strategist. If you give me 1 sec..." He raised his hand. "Everyone says that. Step out." His tone cut straight through her. This wasn't about protocol. This was about control. She unbuckled, opened the door, stepped out, slowly. "Hands where I can see them." Her palms went up, open, clear. He turned her around, gripped her wrists, and cold steel locked tight. The sound made her flinch, not from pain, but from how routine it felt to him. "You're detaining me for what exactly?" "Ma'am, you can argue later. Right now, I'm conducting a field detention based on a reported match." She didn't yell, didn't resist, but her jaw clenched as he led her to the sidewalk, right beside her car, in full view of the street. A young woman on a porch across the way paused, pulled out her phone, started recording. Renee looked down, counted the cracks in the pavement, breathed through her nose. She'd read stories like this, too many times, but this time, the story was writing itself around her, and something told her. It wouldn't just be her name on the pages. Officer Dresner paced by her car, murmuring into his radio, unbothered. Like cuffing a woman in broad daylight, without checking ID, without evidence, was just paperwork. Renee stood stiffly, wrists aching, the March sun heavy on her back. "You're making a mistake," she said, not loud, just clear. "My work ID is in my purse. I'm not who you're looking for." Still, he didn't look at her, still muttering into his mic. "Just doing my job," he finally muttered. "Don't take it personal." She almost laughed. "Your job is cuffing someone without checking their ID?" He walked back toward her, already tired of the conversation. "You fit the description. Black female, dark SUV. Left the scene 10 minutes ago. That's enough for probable cause." "You and I both know that's not enough. Not legally." He leaned in. "Then maybe you shouldn't have come around here looking guilty." "Guilty of what?" she snapped. "Buying Allegra and oat milk?" "Watch your tone," he shot back. That one hit her. Not because it was loud, but because it was familiar. She'd heard it in courtrooms, in meetings, in how certain men said her name like it tasted wrong. She glanced across the street. The girl was still filming. Now there were neighbors watching. A woman by a mailbox. Someone pretending to sweep a porch that didn't need sweeping. "Look," Renee said. "Open my purse. My badge is inside, so is a CVS receipt." "I'm not searching your property without backup," he said. "And I don't need your badge. You'll explain everything downtown." Downtown. He really meant to take her in. "And if I were a white woman in yoga pants driving a Subaru?" she asked, voice steady. His eyes narrowed. "I don't care what you are." But he did. She could feel it. He gripped her elbow and guided her toward the cruiser. Not rough, but not gentle either. She stumbled slightly on a crack. He didn't slow. "You're arresting a state lawyer, on camera," she warned. "You're going to regret this." He didn't reply, but someone else did. "Hey, what's her name?" The girl across the street called out, now halfway into the road, still filming. "Y'all know her name? Renee Alcott," she shouted. RENEEALCOTT. I'm putting it on Twitter right now." Dresner yanked her arm. "Keep walking." But the girl didn't back down. "You don't get to hide anymore. I got it all on video." He opened the cruiser door and shoved Renee inside. She didn't resist, but she felt something close with that door. Not just steel, but the idea that she still had a safety net. She leaned back in the seat, tried to breathe. She wasn't anyone's martyr. She hated these stories, spent her whole career trying to prevent them. And now she was locked inside one. But someone was already watching. Someone who knew exactly who she was. "I made it clear I recognized you immediately," Lieutenant Blanchard said, "and that the stop was inappropriate. This will go through the formal chain." Renee studied him. "I appreciate that, Lieutenant. But you and I both know how those chains work." He paused. "I know. You've been on the right side of cleaning up messes like this. And I also know it doesn't feel any better when you become the example." "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't." A heavy silence settled between them. Not hostile, just weighty. "Do you want me to escort you home?" he asked. "No," she replied. "I think I need the drive." He gave a small nod and glanced back at Dresner. "He's being pulled off duty, pending the review. You'll probably get a call by Monday." "I'll be ready." He nodded again, then turned and walked away. Renee didn't watch him go. She turned her key in the ignition and slowly pulled out of the CVS lot. The paper bag with her receipt sat untouched in the passenger seat. Faint red lines still marked her wrists. And even though she was heading home, it didn't feel like she was leaving anything behind. Because the real storm, it was just hours away, and it was coming online. By the time Renee pulled into her driveway in College Park, her phone was already buzzing, non-stop, missed calls, texts, emails, all piling up in the 20 minutes since she left the parking lot. She sat there in the quiet car, engine off, phone glowing. Her brother Milo had called 3 times. So had a colleague from the AG's office. One message read, "You're all over the timeline. Videos everywhere. You okay?" She finally answered Milo's latest call. "You all right?" he asked immediately. His voice sharp, tight with worry. The kind of tone he used when he was angry, but trying not to show it. "I'm okay," Renee said. "Shaken, but I'm home." "Renee, I saw it. That girl's video. It's already at like 100,000 views. Why the hell did he even... What was that?" She leaned her head against the steering wheel. "He said I matched a description. Black woman, dark SUV. That's all it took." "And he cuffed you? Right there, in public?" "Right on the sidewalk." Milo went quiet. "That's insane." No, she said. That's routine, and that's the problem. He exhaled. You want me to come over? I'll be fine. I just need a minute to sit with this. Her phone buzzed again. Another alert. Twitter. Inside, Renee tossed her keys on the table and dropped onto the couch like she'd been holding herself up for hours. She opened her laptop. She didn't want to read it all, but she needed to know. She typed her own name. The video was everywhere, pinned on viral threads, picked up by news sites, shared by verified legal accounts. Just 90 seconds long, but it told the whole story. A calm, professional woman, asking questions, being dismissed, cuffed, walked to a cruiser. The caption read, "This woman is a lawyer, cuffed for picking up meds, no apology, no badge check, just another afternoon in Georgia." The comments were explosive, outrage, calls for accountability, but mixed in were the familiar replies. She must have said something. Why didn't she just comply? Cops don't arrest people for nothing. Renee scrolled past them. Then her inbox pinged again. Chandra Holbrook, an investigative reporter she'd worked with once before, had emailed. Subject, urgent interview request. Renee, just saw the footage. I'd like to speak with you as soon as possible if you're ready. This story's gaining traction, and I want to make sure your voice is centered before someone else frames it. No pressure. Just reach out when you're ready. Renee didn't answer yet, but that line stayed with her. Center your voice before someone else frames it. She'd seen it happen, to people who didn't get the chance to speak first. The system always ran ahead, softened the language, called it miscommunication, blamed misunderstanding instead of misconduct. She looked down at her wrists again. The red marks were fading, but the memory wasn't. Then her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her boss, Dorian Reeves, Deputy Attorney General. Renee, just saw the video. Let's talk first thing Monday morning. You have our support. We stand behind you. It sounded good, but she knew better. Support came with fine print, especially when reputations were on the line. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, legal career hanging over her like a tightrope, knowing that silence wouldn't protect her anymore. But before she could even decide what to say, someone else said it for her. It started with a tweet. An anonymous account posted a screenshot of Sergeant Colin Dresner's nameplate from the video. Y'all want to talk about this officer? Because this ain't the first time. They attached a link to an old post from 2 years ago. A young man said Dresner pulled him over in a Kroger parking lot, accused him of looking like someone who ran. Same phrasing, same setup. Within hours, more stories started surfacing. A college student from Decatur, a single mom from Forest Park, a substitute teacher who'd filed a complaint and never heard back. None had gone viral. None had made headlines. But the pattern? It was impossible to ignore. By Sunday morning, the Dresner pattern was trending across Georgia, and Annika Branch, the teenager who filmed Renee's arrest, had become the thread's curator. She reposted every story, every name, piecing together a digital paper trail no one had ever looked at fully. One post grabbed Renee's attention. A woman named Sarita Downs said she filed a complaint in 2021 after Dresner threatened to detain her for questioning a warrantless search of her boyfriend's car. She even posted the official response. Reviewed. No misconduct found. No interview. No follow-up. Nothing. Renee sat back in her chair, breathing slowly. It didn't shock her. It felt familiar. This was what the system looked like, when it was working exactly as designed. She opened her work laptop, logged into the public complaints database, a system she rarely touched unless she was doing audits. She typed in Dresner's badge number. 4 entries popped up, 2 marked informal, 1 investigated, no action. The last, pending review, her own case. The notes were vague, aggressive tone. Subject alleges racial bias. Nothing flagged, nothing resolved, just cold phrases soaked in red tape. She took a screenshot, closed the file. Her phone lit up again, another message from Chandra Holbrook. Did you know Dresner already had 3 complaints before yours? Renee typed back, yes, just confirmed it. Nothing was done. Would you be willing to go on record? Renee stared at the screen. Being caught on camera was one thing. Speaking with intent? That was something else. After a pause, she typed, I'll call you in an hour. Then she sent another message, this time to her boss. We need to talk, not Monday, today. By that afternoon, news outlets had picked up the story. The Civilian Oversight Board released a short statement. The police department tweeted that Dresner was on administrative leave, pending an internal review. That phrase again. But this time, people weren't letting it slide. Because this time, the camera was rolling, the receipts were public, and Renee had found her voice. She hadn't planned to speak. She preferred courtrooms to cameras, written policy to interviews. But Monday morning changed everything. The video had crossed 1 million views. Even her old law professor in Oregon emailed her. So she opened a blank document and started writing. Not as a lawyer, but as a woman who had run out of room to stay quiet. I wasn't in danger of losing my life that day, but I did lose something. That's how she started. She wrote about being handcuffed in front of strangers, how dignity can disappear the moment someone decides your words don't matter, about how she had her ID and it didn't matter, how silence in the back of a cruiser felt louder than any courtroom. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't resisting, I didn't match any real description, but I was still treated like a threat, because that's what some people see first, before the badge, before the words, before the truth. She never mentioned Dresner's name. She didn't have to. At 9 a.m., she posted the statement to her social media, then logged into a Zoom meeting with her department's comms team. By noon, her post had been shared over 50,000 times, and the replies poured in, not just support, but stories, doctors, lawyers, nurses, students, people in uniforms, scrubs, hoodies, all sharing their own moments of being profiled, ignored, dismissed. I had my badge in my hand. They still called backup. They thought I was stealing from my own hospital. Corporate lawyer, followed through a store like I was shoplifting. It was overwhelming, but it reminded her she wasn't alone. That afternoon, Renee sat down for her first on-camera interview with Chandra. No glam, no studio, just 2 chairs and a steady lens. You've spent years behind the scenes, Chandra asked. Why speak now? Renee didn't hesitate. Because now I know what it feels like from the other side. I helped write the policies, but they didn't protect me. So if they couldn't protect me, what does that say for everyone else? What would you say, Chandra asked, to those still defending what happened, saying the officer was just doing his job? Renee paused, then answered simply, if your job lets you ignore facts, identity, and basic human dignity, maybe it's time to rethink what that job really is. The clip ran that night on the evening news. It didn't stop there, because people weren't just watching anymore. They were listening, and this time, they believed her. She carried herself with calm, not the kind that could be mistaken for weakness or twisted into anger, but the kind that made people stop and listen. The next morning, someone painted the words, "Dignity looks like Renee," across a wall outside the Fulton County Courthouse. No tag, no artist. Just a message in bold white paint, a quiet tribute, but loud in its own way. Through it all, Renee remained grounded. She granted a few interviews, wrote a short op-ed for a local outlet. She didn't flood her feed. She didn't argue online. She just kept showing up, with her words, her presence, and her quiet insistence that this moment wouldn't be wasted. But the more she spoke, the more pressure mounted on those who had tried to stay silent. By Wednesday, the story had grown too big to contain. Inside City Hall, what had started as a so-called neighborhood misunderstanding had now made its way into press conferences, police union meetings, and the mayor's morning briefings. The phones at the DeKalb County Police Department were ringing off the hook. Civil rights attorneys were making the media rounds, and the phrase "matched the description" had become both a meme and a protest chant. But over at the police union building on Memorial Drive, things were quieter, tense, closed doors, careful conversations. Some officers still backed Sergeant Colin Dresner quietly, insisting he'd done nothing wrong. Others were already distancing themselves. Fast. The department's PR officer, Lena Stowell, released a carefully worded statement that sounded more like a legal disclaimer than an apology. "We take these matters seriously and remain committed to ensuring proper protocol is reviewed. The department will continue cooperating with the oversight process." No mention of Renee. No acknowledgement. Just polished vagueness. Outside the precinct, the protests began. Not huge, but steady. A dozen here, 30 there, students from Georgia State, churchgoers, nurses, public defenders, holding up signs, passing out flyers, pointing to QR codes linking to Dresner's complaint history, and printed copies of Renee's public statement. One chant caught on first: "Check the purse before the cuffs." By Thursday morning, even the Attorney General's office couldn't ignore the momentum. Renee was called into a closed-door meeting with AG Milton Farrow and several senior deputies. She arrived early, files in hand, wearing a navy blazer and slacks, not because she needed to look professional, but because she refused to let anyone reduce her to the woman in cuffs. Farrow stood as she entered. "Renee," he said with a heavy sigh, "glad you could make time." She sat without ceremony. "Figured I'd be seeing you sooner or later." He offered a tight smile. "You've become the face of a very complicated story." "I didn't ask to be." "No, you didn't," he replied, then tapped his pen on the desk. "But now we have legislators asking what kind of accountability we're really supporting, whether this office has done enough to prevent things like this." "I've been asking that question since I got here," Renee said flatly. One of the deputies cleared her throat. "There's talk of a joint task force, civilian review boards, transparency protocols." "I drafted 3 versions of that policy last year," Renee said. "Nobody wanted to touch it." Farrow leaned back. "That's changed. Pressure moves people. They want optics. And results." Renee looked him in the eye. "Then make it real. Don't use my face for show while nothing changes behind the scenes." There was a beat of silence. Then he said, "We'd like you to co-chair the task force." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You know the issues. You've lived the impact. You've earned public trust. You'd have say over structure, data collection, review process, everything." "And Dresner?" "He's under investigation. We can't interfere directly." "You want me to help fix the system that handcuffed me a week ago?" "We want your help making sure this doesn't happen again." Renee could feel it in the room, the politics, the calculation. They didn't want her going rogue. They wanted her in the room, in the system, where her power could be managed. Still, part of her wanted to say yes. Not for them, but for the people who didn't have her platform, for Annika, for Sarita Downs, for every name that never made the news. "I'll consider it," she said, "but only if the task force includes people who've been stopped, not just the ones who write the rules." Pharaoh looked momentarily surprised, then nodded. "Understood." Renee stood to leave. As she walked out, two staffers whispered in the hallway. One of them looked up, not with pity, but with respect. But not everyone wanted her to become the face of change, and the backlash was waiting. By Friday evening, she finally had a moment to breathe. No calls, no press. Just her and a lukewarm cup of peppermint tea in a dim living room. Her shoes were by the door. Blazer draped over the armrest, eyes tired, not just from the week, but from everything it revealed. A knock broke the quiet. She peeked through the curtain. Milo. He stood holding takeout bags, wearing a hoodie that read, "Ask me why I'm angry." She opened the door, smirking. "Tell me that's not custom." "Nah," he said. "Etsy, some teacher in Macon. She's got your quote on mugs now." "What quote?" "I don't carry my title expecting immunity, but I do expect dignity." He grinned. "You're on drinkware now. Wild times." She rolled her eyes, but smiled anyway. They sat at the kitchen table and unpacked the food: fried okra, grilled catfish, cornbread, from a spot they used to visit with their dad. They ate in silence for a while. Comfortable silence. Then Milo asked, "Does it feel real to you yet?" "What part?" "All of it. The cameras, the protests, the offers, the fact that you might have been booked if that lieutenant hadn't shown up." She chewed slowly. "It feels like someone else's story, but I know it's mine, because I still wake up wondering if I should have done something differently." "Like what?" "I don't know. Said less. Reached for my badge sooner." Milo shook his head. "That's not your burden. He decided who you were before you said a word." She looked down at her plate. "I know, but it doesn't stop the replay in my head." He tapped her knuckles gently. "Don't let them twist this. You stayed calm. You spoke up. And now people are listening." Later that night, she got a call from Sasha, a younger colleague she'd mentored. "You okay?" Sasha asked softly. "I'm here," Renee replied. "I keep thinking about something you told me 2 years ago. You said, stay sharp, stay visible. Don't assume the room sees your value just because you're present." Renee smiled into the phone. "Didn't think that advice would boomerang like this." "It helped," Sasha said. "We needed this, not what happened to you, but the clarity." Then she added, "I want to be on the task force. I'll make sure there's a seat for you." After the call, Renee stood by the window, arms folded. Outside, the street was calm, ordinary, which somehow made it harder. How quickly moments could shift, from safe to something else. But she was still here, not broken, not hiding, still standing, still seen. Monday came like a reset button. Renee stood outside the Georgia State Capitol in a soft gray suit. Flats on concrete, reporters gathering for the press conference, no grand banners, just a podium, a plain pop-up backdrop with the state seal. She was flanked by members of the newly formed Police Accountability Task Force, community advocates, retired judges, and 2 civilians whose complaints had once gone unheard. And just off-center stood Annika Branch, clipboard in hand, press badge around her neck. Someone had offered her an internship after all this. She took it. Renee stepped to the mic. Her voice was steady, not theatrical, just real. "I didn't set out to be anyone's headline," she said. "I didn't post the video. I didn't plan the protests. I didn't ask for the attention. But I won't reject it now that it's here." She paused, long enough for every camera to catch the weight of her words. What happened to me wasn't the worst thing, but it was revealing. Because if this can happen to someone who works inside the justice system, who knows the law, the process, the language, then what's happening to the people who don't? She laid out the task force's first steps: independent review of misconduct complaints, public access to disciplinary data, mandatory community interviews in use of force cases, small changes, but real ones. Then she closed the way she needed to, for herself. This isn't just about me. It's about how fast someone can be erased when they're inconvenient. I don't expect immunity, but I do expect to be seen, fully, fairly, and with dignity. There was a moment of silence, then applause, not explosive, but solid. Afterward, Renee posed for a photo with the task force. Annika stood beside her. Milo watched from the side, arms crossed, proud. Walking to her car, Renee passed a woman, maybe in her 60s, holding a handwritten sign. "My grandson was stopped by the same officer. No one believed us. Thank you for speaking." They locked eyes. No words exchanged. Just a nod. One that didn't end a conversation, but began an understanding. Back in her car, Renee exhaled. Not in relief, not in closure, but in readiness. This road wouldn't be easy. The system rarely changed without resistance. But now more people were watching. More people were speaking. Before turning the ignition, she checked her phone. No new mentions, no urgent emails. Just one text from Sasha. "They're not ready for you, but you're exactly who they need." She smiled and typed back, "Let's give them what they never asked for, but always should have had." Because this story reminds us of something simple. Titles don't protect you from being profiled. Politeness doesn't stop handcuffs, and dignity should never have to be earned. Renee didn't go viral because she shouted. She went viral because she didn't break. She kept her voice. When someone tried to take it away, let that be the lesson. Speak up when it counts. Stay calm, but never small. And when the spotlight finds you, don't shrink. Stand taller. If this story moved you, subscribe, share it. And remember, someone's silence today could be your silence tomorrow. Make it count.